Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. My name is the Reverend Lois Van Leer, and it is my pleasure to be leading this worship service with our Director of Faith Formation and Spiritual Development, Katie Seipert, our ministerial intern, Jennifer Hackett, our music director, Mitch Davey, our accompanist, Susan Giordano, and our worship associate, Chris Olson. And just an aside, if you thought those videos were preaching to the choir, just know that the choir needs to be preached to as well sometimes. So I hope you enjoyed them. This morning, if you're carrying a heavy heart, may you entrust it to this faith community. If you're weary and you're confused, may you find some respite and some clarity here. If you have sorrows that feel too deep to bear, may you find a place here and someone here to hold them with you. If you come with questions about meaning and purpose, may you find some insight here. If you come with questions about faith, may they be honored here. If you feel broken beyond repair, may you find a spark of healing here. If you are in need of solace, may you find some here. If you are in need of courage, may you find the strength for it here. If you are in need of faith and have none, come borrow ours until you can claim it or another one for your own. If you're in need of welcome, may you find it here. Welcome to worship. It is so good to be together.
We have some beloved members of our community who have passed this last month. And we'd like to ask you to join us in a moment of remembering the life and love of UUCE members. I'll call their names as I light their candles. This one is for Jean Carley. This one is for Doris Callahan. And a third for Marie Wiles. We light these 3 candles to honor their memory today.
We light this chalice on a wing and a prayer, the tiniest of lights, faith, a flame, emboldened and able to pierce the murkiness of these times, and ever so softly lead us, carry us home.
I'd like to ask you to join me in a time of meditation, and that can mean or be a lot of things for different people. So do whatever it is you need to do to get comfortable. For some of us, that means closing our eyes or sitting up straight, feet on the ground, hands in a form of a mudra, a Buddhist mudra. For others, it could be breathing deeply. And for some, it may be enough just to be still in whatever your mind and your body and your spirit will allow. And now that you have settled there, I invite you into this time of a guided meditation. I'm asking you to trust me and to move into uncertainty with me. Let your mind give itself over to the discomfort, the unknown, the fear, the anxiety. Don't resist it. Just move into it. Let it all gather. Not loudly, but just quietly present. When you begin to feel that it will choke you or bring a scream to your lips or a tear to your eye, you will know that you are in it, with it. Ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? Okay. And then what? Let's just bring all of this down to a manageable level and size. I mean, it's not like we had control anyway. We do what we can when we can with what we have at that point in time, and then we have to let it glow. It's out of our control. Yet we can know that we gave it our all. We can survive the worst thing that can happen. We've been doing it for millions of years. And just when we think that all is lost, something blooms in us or in our world. Something breaks forth out of all that pain, that confusion, that anxiety, that fear, that suffering, because life insists on itself. Even in the midst of all that would seemingly destroy it, we will rise not out of the ruins, but out of a dreamed of, imagined, possible future. You want faith? You want hope? You want assurance? You've got to create it out of nothing. And when anyone among us cries that they cannot create it, we have to offer ours to them and let them hold it until they can remember what it feels like, until something begins to quiver and beat and come into itself. They may have to do the same for us someday. That is a certainty, a known, a calm, a relief in the eye of the storm of our living. May it be so.
All will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. I said, Julian, you are holy, you are holding my hand, and Julian, you are holy, you are holding my hand. She said, all will be well. All will be well, all manner of things will be well. I said, Julian, do you not know about sorrow? And Julian, do you not know about pain? I said, Julian, do you not know about hunger? Julian, do you not know about shame? She said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. I said, Julian, do you not know about loneliness? And Julian, do you not know about disease? And I said, Julian, do you not know about cruelty? I said, Julian, it's too much, it's brought me to my knees. And she said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. And she said, no one does not know about sorrow. May no one does not know about pain. She said, no one does not know about hunger, and no one does not know about shame. She said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, no one does not know about loneliness, and no one does not know about disease. She said, no one does not know about cruelty. She said, I know it's too much. Brought me to my knees, where I heard, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, baby girl, do you not know about tenderness? She said, baby girl, do you not know about friends? She said, baby girl, do you not know about the spirit? And she said, baby girl, do you not know it's only love that never ends? It's only love that never ends. And so all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. And so all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well.
These are the words of Marge Piercy. 2 people can keep each other sane. 3 people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With 6, you can hold a fundraising party, and 12 make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we. Our story this morning comes from Francis Dorf O'Prame, The Rabbi's Gift. So there was once a monastery that stood with a wood at the edges, a monastery that had been full of life and prayer, but at this time was falling into disrepair and ruin. There were a few monks that still lived there and said the daily prayers, but they were filled with a longing for how it had been and were uncertain about what the future held for themselves, for their wishes in the world. In the wood that surrounded this monastery, there stood a small hut. It was a place where the rabbi came every once in a while to sit and to pray and to meditate and to be alone by himself. And one day, the abbot, walking the woods, came to the rabbi's door, to the door of his hut, and there stood the rabbi with his arms outstretched, as if he had been standing there waiting for the abbot, waiting for his old friend to arrive. And they embraced and greeted one another as old friends do, and went inside the rabbi's hut. And there on the table were the scriptures spread out. And so the rabbi and the abbot sat at the table together, reading the word and weeping. the rabbi and the abbot both feeling the grief, this sense of a lost way, this sense of not knowing what would come next. And their tears were a form of prayer as they landed on the word. And after they had emptied themselves of their sorrows, the rabbi looked at the abbot and said, I'm going to tell you something, and you can only speak it once. I want you to know that the Messiah is among you. And the abbot, struck almost to silence, are you sure? Among us, the Messiah? He went back to the monastery that night, thinking about this gift that the rabbi had given him, this incredible, incredible hope that it sprung alive in him. And so he called all of his brothers together, all of the monks of the monastery who were there, and he shared that gift with them. Brothers, he said, the Messiah is among us. I can only tell you once, but this is an incredible thing right here, right now. And all of the brothers looked at one another, kind of with questions in their hearts and in their eyes. Could it be Brother Matthew? Could it be Brother Jonathan? My goodness, who could it be within these walls, the Messiah? And as the days went on from there, they began to treat each other just a little differently, just a little more love and compassion in their hearts for one another, just a little more kindness. They lived among each other as people who had already discovered something precious. And they read the scripture as people who were looking for something precious. And wouldn't you know it, as the years went by, more and more people were drawn to the monastery, wanted to be inside those walls, to live among those people, and to read those holy words together. As the years went by, the rabbi's hut fell into ruin, but the message that he brought to the people lived strong and compassionate and whole within everyone who came. Thank you so much for joining me in this story and in thinking about what it might mean for the Messiah to live with us right here, right now, for there to be that secret held within each of our hearts.
If being a Unitarian Universalist were against the law, would there be enough evidence to convict you? It's a big question, so I'm going to say it one more time. If being a Unitarian Universalist were against the law, would there be enough evidence to convict you?
So just to set the record straight, it turns out that the year 2020 is not the worst year on record in human history. That honor is reserved for the year 536 AD. That was the year that a volcano blew in Iceland, and it spread across Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. And for 2 years, they were all plunged into a foggy darkness. So just imagine that dark and the fire smoke skies and air we lived with in September magnified and extended, and you will begin to get a sense of what occurred. Temperatures dropped so that they were very, very cold, and crops failed, famine set in, and then 7 years later, the economy went bust. The bubonic plague hit and took out 1 million people, which was at the time half of the Byzantine Empire. Now, none of the above is to diminish just how hard 2020 has been and continues to be. A colleague once referred to a difficult year in the life of Unitarian Universalism as the year that will not behave. Many of us refer to 2020 as the year that will not quit. I mean, what else can befall us? Please don't ask, please don't tell, don't give any of that any energy. I want you to spend all your rational minds at least until November 3rd and practice any and all superstitious behaviors. But I mention 536 to try and give us some context, because humans have stood poised on the brink of many precipices. I mean, the stakes have always been high. But we, the people of this time, are living with a particularly precarious precipice. Victory on Tuesday, or whatever day the election results are declared or certified, means much will be required of us. Defeat on Tuesday means much will be required of us. We will need the discipline of responding intentionally as opposed to merely reacting. We will need to determine what will be required, and that will be a matter of personal and communal discernment. And for some, we are in what's called a Bonhoeffer moment. And in Christianity, a Bonhoeffer moment is a time when a person of faith has to decide how they are going to counter what appears to be the presence of evil in the world. And let me give you my definition of evil. And by evil, I mean very human acts that defy moral, ethical codes and impose suffering seemingly without conscience or consequence. A Bonhoeffer moment is a moment where people say enough is enough, and they're willing to do whatever it is that is required: civil disobedience, violence, to stop the government in its tracks, or to use Bonhoeffer's language, to stick a spoke in the wheel of government. Regardless of the outcome of the election on Tuesday, there are plenty of us who are still going to proclaim that enough is enough. So I've been thinking about Bonhoeffer for months now because I wanted to understand how he theologically and ethically came to be part of a plot to assassinate Hitler, how a devout, pacifist Christian arrived at the decision to kill. Because I'd always read that he had been hung for his part in such a failed assassination attempt. Bonhoeffer was a German pastor and teacher and theologian at the time of Hitler's rise to power. And he's most famous for a book that he wrote called The Cost of Discipleship, which outlines exactly what the title implies: how to live in this world as a disciple of Jesus. And I've always struggled with those who have, quote, found Jesus Christ and talk about him as their, quote, personal Lord and Savior. Why? Because Christianity was never meant to be a religion of individualism, about merely individual faith. It's always been about community and the communal, and about following and enacting the teachings of Jesus right here, right now, on behalf of the marginalized and the disenfranchised. Bonhoeffer wrote that, quote, the authentic Christian witness must reject the pursuit of personal salvation as its aim and focus instead on sharing God's sufferings in the world. The day after yet another failed assassination attempt on Hitler's life that Bonhoeffer was aware of, he wrote, "I thought I could acquire faith by trying to live a holy life. I discovered later, and am still discovering right up to this moment, that's only by living completely in this world that one learns to have faith." Or to translate this sentiment into UU speak, hear the words of our 20th century theologian, James Luther Adams. And this is what he wrote: "A church that does not concern itself with the struggle in history for human decency and justice, a church that does not show concern for the shape of things to come, a church that does not attempt to interpret the signs of the times is not a prophetic church. The prophetic liberal church is the church in which persons think and work together to interpret the signs of the times in light of their faith. The prophetic liberal church is the church in which all members share the common responsibility to attempt to foresee the consequences of human behavior, both individual and institutional, with the intention of making history in place of merely being pushed around by it." So I struggle with folks waving their hands in the air and sobbing about Jesus. That faith only has integrity or credibility to me if those same hands are reaching metaphorically down into the gutter of our society where the marginalized and disenfranchised have been shoved. So if one takes Jesus seriously, if one dedicates one's life to being his disciple, life becomes anything but easy, because it's about living with a heavy cost, the cost of which the Hebrew Bible prophet Micah said in this question, "And what does the Lord require of you?" And then answers, "But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God." And though we as current UUs today may not identify as Christians or Jews even, this notion of the cost of one's faith, this notion of justice making, it's our inheritance. It's no secret that many folks have talked about the parallels between what has been happening in our country since 2016, for that matter, since the 1990s, to the rise of Hitler and fascism in Germany and in Europe. This moment in time is indeed for us a Bonhoeffer moment, when determining what faith requires of us, discerning what right action is up front and center. Bonhoeffer could have taken the easy route out of Nazi Germany. In fact, he was teaching in Union Seminary in New York City, but returned to Germany because he wrote, "I must live through this difficult period of our national history with the Christian people of Germany. I will have no right to participate in the reconstruction of Christian life in Germany after the war if I do not share the trials of this time with my people." Now, I know that there are folks who are trying to get out of the United States right now because they fear that they're going to become targets if the current administration remains in power. They don't want to risk, if you will, being the last Jew out of Germany this time around. And we don't need any more martyrs. We're not all Bonhoeffers. Each one of us must determine what is right action for us in the face of what may transpire. Resistance can take many forms. Two events occurred that drove Hitler to join the counterintelligence agency of the armed forces of Germany. And the first was that the confessing church and all its ministers gave their full allegiance to Hitler. The church gave its full allegiance to Hitler. And Bonhoeffer was horrified that, quote, "the cross on the Wartburg, which was a famous castle, had been replaced during Holy Week by an immense floodlit swastika. The second event is known as Kristallnacht, when Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues had their windows broken, their property trashed or burnt. And depending on which historian one reads, Bonhoeffer joined this intelligence agency so that he could gather information and to avoid conscription and having to swear a loyalty oath to Hitler. Bonhoeffer used his position in this counterintelligence agency to meet with the Allied forces in other countries and to tell them about Hitler's military plans, to tell them about the concentration camps. And sadly, there is no evidence that his efforts had any effect. He was arrested after yet another failed attempt on Hitler's life, an attempt that was carried out by men in the resistance that Bonhoeffer was close to. Yet he didn't participate in that attempt or any other assassination attempt. He was actually arrested for his part in helping 14 Jews get to Switzerland and using German money to make that happen. He was indicted when it was discovered that he had evaded military conscription. So he was essentially hung for refusing to serve in the army and kill. And yet there's another quote from him that has stuck with me and haunted me these weeks. He wrote, "I would rather do evil than be evil. I would rather do evil than be evil." Now, we have no way of knowing what acts or actions Bonhoeffer would have engaged in had he lived, which, when he asked that question, to do evil, or makes that statement, to do evil rather than be evil, for me, it's another way of saying, what is required of me? And I wonder, here in this time, how far am I willing to go to resist evil? Would I rather do evil than be evil if the ultimate outcome would be justice? Would having done evil land on the correct moral side, outweighing the evil being taken on or engaged in? And so all of this brings me back to that line that Jennifer read for you. If being a Unitarian Universalist were against the law, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Are we a heady tradition of lofty words and aspirations that allows us to be sidelined, or are we a faith tradition that actually requires something of us, of our beliefs, of our convictions? I would argue that much is required of us at this moment in history. Inaction, sitting on the sidelines, it's not an option. I always thought that this quote was from Dante, but there is no evidence that it was actually his, but it's worth repeating. This quote says that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis remain neutral. Or as our UUA president, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, has made her rallying cry, this is no time for a casual faith. I mean, I have hopes for how things are going to go on Tuesday, but I have no idea what's actually going to happen. What I can tell you is that if the current administration either retains its power and control or refuses to abide by the laws of the land in regard to the electoral process, I will be in my clergy collar on some street with other clergy engaged in nonviolent direct action to shut down business as usual. COVID be damned. If I'm arrested for praying in public, so be it. For at least I'll be able to live with myself and what I profess. We've been told repeatedly that no matter who wins on Tuesday, we have a lot of work to do to unite this country, to try and repair and rebuild from the unofficial but seemingly sanctioned civil war we've been living. No matter who wins on Tuesday, there's going to be work to do. We know that. Racism is not going to go away with the change of administration, nor will homophobia and transphobia or economic inequality or the attacks on economic freedom, nor the full-on desecration of the earth, or the cruelty shown refugees and immigrants. The work will always be there. But here's where I differ from some of the other voices that are being raised around this issue of reconciliation. I see no need to try and be reconciled to or with groups like the Proud Boys, Hell-Shaking Preachers, Pacific Coast Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, Northwest Hammerskins, American Identity Movement, the American Front, or any other such group. All of those hate groups are active in Oregon, and the Proud Boys are right here in Eugene. Rather than reconciliation, I want a resistance to the hate they espouse, the legitimacy they have gained, and the permission given they have enjoyed under the current administration. Their hate beliefs are a threat not only to BIPOC folk, Jews, Muslims, immigrants, queer folks, they are a threat to what it means to be white. How? Well, think about it. They share an undercurrent of thought about what it means to be white. Do you want them representing whiteness? If not, we all need to do some work about understanding what it means to be white and to voice our opposition to their definition. It reminds me of the times when I used to be asked to go into these college classrooms and talk about homosexuality. I never failed to speak about Christianity's abuse of queer folk. And so inevitably, it happened every time. A student would raise their hand and say, but I'm a Christian and I don't think that way. And I would look at them and I would say, well, then you need to take back Christianity and say to the hate spewers, you don't speak for me. Do any of us want the Proud Boys or the Klan to speak for those of us who are white? Or are we brave enough and courageous enough to do the work of coming to grips with whiteness and saying to the white identity hate groups, you don't speak for me? I see no need for reconciliation with those who have passed laws that take away rights from people or actively allow open season on minority populations or rigged and stacked judgeships across every level of the judiciary, or have chosen the party line so that they can remain in office, rather than being courageous enough to take on what's clearly unethical, suspect, and corrupt. For those who have substituted an authentic faith for a convenient one that will win them votes and access to power and money. I don't need to punish those folks. I just want them to fall, to be put out to pasture where they can contemplate their sins. And yes, I will pray for them and their conversion, but I don't have to be reconciled to them or to the things they have done. But more than resistance, I want an insistence on the values that UUism holds, that care for the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized, care for the earth, radical hospitality, especially of those labeled other. And that last one was something that Bonhoeffer really had adopted. In his time, it was the case of othering Jews, and he refused to do it. I want an insistence on a belief in the democratic process, a reclamation of that process, and an insistence on the affirmation of religious and spiritual differences and truths, a pluralism of both. I want us to insist on the role of science in fact-finding and creating truths, to insist on basic human rights to potable water, shelter, food, healthcare, reproductive care, employment, and a refusal to worship at the altar of greed. And I'm sure you all can add a ton that are your own values that have brought you to this tradition. There's this great quote from the book of Deuteronomy in the Hebrew Bible that says, justice, justice, justice shalt thou pursue. In his essay, The Church and the Jewish Question, Bonhoeffer says there are three possibilities for action that the church can take in regard to the state. And the first is to question the state as the legitimate character of its actions. In other words, making it be responsible for what it does. And second is to serve the victims of the state's actions. The church, he writes, has an unconditional obligation toward the victims of any societal order. And the third possibility, it's not just to bind up the wounds of the victims, but it is to seize the wheel itself. Seems to me like a great response to the question of what is required of us. So, are we going to take 1, 2, 3, any of the options, the courses of action that Bonhoeffer offers? Will we resist the status quo and insist on a different way? Each of us must engage in a process of discernment in this moment in time to answer the questions of what is right action? What shall we do? How shall we live? Are we willing to take on the cost of living into our faith? Do we have the courage of our convictions? If being a Unitarian Universalist becomes against the law, will there be enough evidence to convict us? These coming days and weeks, months, and years demand that each of us answer these questions. This is no time for a casual faith. So people, get ready.
For fun nights and voting our values, for Halloween joy, for medicine that works, and for these changing times, we are so thankful. For mental health issues affecting families, for COVID striking close to home, for all of the things that we have lost this year, for those we have named today and those unnamed in this community and adjacent to our community whom we have lost this month, we hold you. You are not alone in your sorrow. For all of these joys and sorrows that have been named by our beloveds today, as well as for those that you hold in your heart, today we pray with you. We breathe with you. We work to enact change with and for you. Today, you are not alone.
We are a generous community with principles affirming the value of all people and our planet, affirming not just with our words, but with our actions. We give our love, our time, our talent, and when we can, our money, because we are a generous community.
Good morning, UUCE. The next song I'm about to play for you is a song that I wrote in the last few weeks in response to our upcoming election. It's called Vote Out Loud. And it was inspired by the work of Carol Anderson, who's one of the leading scholars in African American studies. She's a professor at Emory University. And her book, One Person, No Vote, really sums up how voter suppression is one of the biggest threats facing our democracy. And so I hope you enjoy Vote Out Loud for the millions of Americans whose voices have been silenced due to voter suppression. 1, 2, 3. Many people of color live in America light as citizens stripped of their constitutional rights. Now here we stand, our democracy on the line, praying for some intervention from the divine. Even today in this land we call free, the polls using voter IDs. States purge their rolls using illegal means, and gerrymandered districts keep the white men in their seats. This is a war for the soul of America, until one person, one vote is achieved. Raise your ballot and high, shout your vote out loud. Oh, fight for what this country's meant to be, a true democracy, fair and free. For the sake of all of those who have paved the way, who have given their lives so that we may vote today, please do not believe all the stories that you hear. Do not believe the lies, trust the facts that are clear. This nation's been living in political denial, hiding behind legal trial after trial. Voter suppression hacked American elections long before any foreign interjections. This is a war for the soul of America, until one person, one vote is achieved. Cast your ballot with pride, shout your vote out loud. Oh, fight for what this country's meant to be, a true democracy, fair and free. Oh, well, voting's not a privilege, nor a prize to receive. It's the most basic right our democracy's conceived. The people of America deserve to have their say. Stand proud, vote out loud, don't let them take your vote away. This is a war for the soul of America, until one person, one vote is achieved. Cast your ballot with pride, shout your vote out loud. Oh, fight for what this country's meant to be, a true democracy, fair and free. Yeah!
Guided by love, we gratefully receive your offering. May it help us transform ourselves, our beloved community, and the world.
Dear ones, I'm aware that we are about 15 minutes over the normal time, even though you're just lucky you weren't living in 1800s in Boston. You'd be standing in Faneuil Hall for 3 hours listening to some of our forebears. I want to remind you to stick around for the selfie slideshow and for Suzanne's postlude. But I want to send you forth right now with a benediction. So get your chalices ready. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But we don't have to buckle beneath its burden. We will rise up. Watch out then. Will you join my hand in yours, forming a prayerful blockade, hearts on fire with a heat and insistence that love will have the final say? No doubt. Watch out. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be.